Now, when mass demonstrations in the spring led to the downfall of the Sudanese dictator Omar al-Bashir, protesters hoped for a peaceful transition to civilian rule. But since then, the backlash has been brutal. Hundreds have died or gone missing. One man has tightened his grip on power through the most brutal arm of the state, known as the Rapid Support Forces. What's most surprising is that Himedti seemingly built up his power with the help of money from the European Union. And a warning, this report from Yusur El-Bigir does contain images that some viewers may find disturbing.
In 2 months, Sudan's pro-democracy protests went from this to this. In a day of carnage, the capital came to understand what the people of Darfur have long known. This regime is capable of anything. Hundreds of unarmed protesters were killed, raped, beaten, and robbed. These extremely graphic photos show how the remains of those executed were weighed down with rocks and hurled into the River Nile. Their rotting bodies are still being recovered. All this was the handiwork of a notorious paramilitary group known as the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. Now, we can reveal the key players who facilitated their rise to power. They include both repressive regional states and the European Union. The RSF are commanded by this man, Mohamed Hamdan Daglo, also known as Himedti. This is him now, in his capacity as number 2 in the ruling military council. But many say Himedti is Sudan's new dictator. So who is this man?
I'm meeting a very special source, a defected security forces officer who was involved in training the Rapid Support Forces in South Kordofan to the south of the country. We're meeting here because this is the only place that he feels safe right now. We're going to a safe location to conduct our interview.
The intelligence services created the RSF for the protection of the regime's inner core, with the expectation that one day the people would revolt. Himedti was their trump card for emergency use only.
Originally known as the Janjaweed, or devils on horseback, the RSF were used ruthlessly to crush insurgencies in restive provinces across Sudan. In Darfur, they committed genocide. At least 400,000 people were killed. But Himedti, a village boy who once traded camels for a living, was now in his element.
He's a power-hungry mercenary. He was a Janjaweed leader, a bandit and a gangster who found huge access to weapons, to power, and made a name for himself.
Himedti indeed had bigger ambitions. Sudan is in a very strategic position. It's both near Yemen, where a regional war broke out in 2015, and it lies at the heart of one of the routes used by migrants and refugees to try and reach Europe. Himedti took advantage of this to further his and the RSF's agenda. When the migrant crisis started, the EU panicked. It sent hundreds of millions of euros to African states to try and stop it. Himedti wanted a slice of the action, so he used his militia to catch migrants before they reached the Mediterranean. Here, he threatens to halt the RSF's border patrols if he isn't paid.
We request that the EU recognises our efforts to combat illegal migration and human traffickers, or else we'll suspend operations.
In 2017, journalist Phil Cox travelled to Sudan for this programme to investigate claims EU money had ended up with the RSF. But then, things went horribly wrong.
3 nights ago we got stopped at a roadblock and basically kidnapped. And we've had 3 days of being in chains by a government militia called Rapid Force.
Later, he was bound up, taken to an RSF security base and presented to Himedti, who then admitted to having EU ties.
One of the things he said to me was that the EU is very important to us, that he was aware of what the EU funds were and what was expected of him and his militia within Darfur, which was supposedly to control the migration flow.
And the allegations get worse.
The men told me that an easy way of making money was they themselves, the RSF, were involved in people smuggling. They're involved in trafficking, and this was a way to make money. And I also saw it with my own eyes.
Several sources on the ground in Sudan told Channel 4 News one way or another, European money had reached this brutal militia.
I've spoken to 4 different RSF officers about this. Each one told me the Rapid Forces have received financial support from the European Union. They rejected any claims of training, but said there has definitely been funding from the EU.
But the European Commission told us the Rapid Support Forces do not benefit directly or indirectly from EU funding, nor does the Transitional Military Council, the Sudanese military, or government. Any suggestions otherwise are wrong or misleading. Other actors play a more direct role. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are not keen on a democracy in their backyard. They also support Himedti because thousands of his troops have been fighting for them in Yemen in exchange for vast sums of money. Channel 4 News has obtained this exclusive footage of RSF fighters near the front line.
There are 10,000 of us in the Emirati Sudanese division, and there are other Sudanese units too. Whatever happens, we'll stay here to fight with the Arab coalition.
Among them, hundreds of child soldiers, cannon fodder seduced by the generous salaries paid to the Rapid Support Forces. These photos, showing what appear to be armed teenagers in RSF uniforms, were sent to us by activists in Sudan. Himedti's rise to power has been astonishing. Frequently dismissed as the regime's simple-minded attack dog, he's proved astute at playing the long game.
Although people say, he's an illiterate man, come up from a camel herder and things like that, he's obviously very smart in how he can see the long term and how he can work the people around him and above and below him. My takeaway from being in that room with him was that he instilled fear and he instilled respect. And whether you can read or write really doesn't matter to that effect.
Reports of newly burnt villages suggest the RSF are back on the rampage in Darfur, and at least 10,000 of them are now in complete control of the capital. Himedti, the uneducated village boy, has become the fearsome man in charge.